Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak on Trust Television. It's a beautiful Thursday morning here from the nation's capital with a bit of rain here and there to cool down the temperature and help people get a sound sleep over the night. I am Sunday Michael Ogu, and it promises to be interesting today.
Indeed, and I'm Sagir Ibrahim. Welcome to Daybreak on Trust TV. Good morning, Sunday.
Good morning. Finally. After a series of shouting and complaining and whining and keeping the issues on the front burner, the first batch of Nigerian students who were stranded arrived home late last night. Some are reporting in the wee hours of this morning. But what's important is that they are home and dry.
Indeed.
And I'm sure the parents can for once get a decent sleep.
Yes.
Given the agony, if you like, that they went through in what appears to be like a journey from of the Israelite from Egypt.
Indeed. And well, hopefully with the return of the first batch, we would see a subsequent arrival of others. And we hope that all of the challenges that were identified by both the government side and even also the students and also onlookers would be addressed, and the process would be more seamless.
Hopefully, as what we need to see as Nigerians, which was very obvious in all of this process, was a synergy between agencies that are supposed to make this kind of activities seamless. We don't want to continue to see the humanitarian ministry tell us something different, and the Foreign Affairs Ministry is telling us something different, and the disaster agency,
something different.
At the end of the day, these students will be left to bear the brunt. Some have been of the opinion that because their parents sent them there, they should find their way back. Then we'll be failing as a country, because there would have been no need if citizens would have to carry every cross by themselves.
Yes,
there are diplomatic engagements involved, and we have a country. And it is at moments like this that the country show how much value it places on the life of its citizens.
Yes, indeed. And moving forward, we'll go on a quick breather, and when we return, we'll serve you the headline. Stay with us. And to the headlines now. Sudan crisis, Nigerian evacuees finally arrive in Abuja.
All right, we have overcome challenges in obtaining Nigerian passports, according to the federal government.
Also, make school curriculum relevant to national needs, UNESCO tells federal government.
And now the details. The first batch of the Nigerians who fled the war in Sudan have returned to the country. Due to the closure of the Sudanese airspace, the federal government made an arrangement for them to be conveyed to Egypt by road from where they were to connect flights back home. The Nigerians who were airlifted on Wednesday evening landed at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja around 11:30 p.m. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, Sadia Farouk, Chairman CEO of Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission, Abike Dabiri Erewa, and the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency, Ahmed Mustafa, welcomed them back to the country. The minister disclosed that each of them would get 100,000 naira to enable them settle in.
And also, the federal government said that her strident efforts at overcoming the challenges Nigerians encounter in obtaining passports are yielding the desired result. The government also urged citizens to assist the reform process at the Nigerian Immigration Service by not patronizing corrupt officials who are making the process difficult for them. Minister of Interior Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola, who spoke at the commissioning of the front desk office in Oyo State, said the Oyo Passport Front Office is part of the long-term initiatives to make the process of data capturing production and collection, which are critical areas of the passport process, easier, all in a bid to address the growing concerns of Nigerians.
And moving on, the National Institute for Cancer Research and Treatment, NICRAT, has expressed concern over the revelation of the presence of a carcinogenic compound, ethylene oxide, in Indomie instant noodle special chicken flavor. The Director General of the Institute, Professor Usman Malami Aliu, said he found that some brands of Indomie noodles contain ethylene oxide. Nigerians should expect an escalation of the various forms of cancer in the months or years ahead, depending on how long people have consumed the brand. He said more worrisome is the fact that Nigerians should also expect an increase in cancer cases among children because Indomie noodle is a popular food among most Nigerian children.
And finally, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, has urged the federal government to develop a school curriculum that is relevant to its national needs. UNESCO's Director for the International Bureau of Education, Mr. Ido Yao, made the call at a 4-day capacity building workshop organized by the UN Agency for officials of the Ministry of Education in Abuja. The workshop is in line with the Transforming Education Summit, CES, held in New York in September 2022, which reiterated that the summit must more than ever be a priority for government, development partners, civil society, and multilateral agencies.
And that's it on our news highlight on the hour. Moving on to our packages at this moment. President Muhammadu Buhari has launched a long-term national development plan, the Nigeria Agenda 2050. The agenda, which aims to ensure that the country attains a per capita GDP of $33,000 per annum, placing her among the top middle-income economies in the world in the next 27 years. The president launched the plan on Wednesday before the commencement of the Federal Executive Council meeting at the State House in Abuja. Kainde Amodu brings us more.
In a dynamic, industrialized and knowledge-based economy that generates inclusive and sustainable development for the country. The president believes successive administrations will find it easier to deliver on election promises because of the instruments embedded in the plan for continuous implementation.
The plan we are launching today is a vision of a dynamic, industrialized, and knowledge-based economy that generates inclusive and sustainable development for the country. The broad target is to ensure that Nigeria attains per capita GDP of $33,328 United States dollars per annum that will place her among the top middle-income economies in the world by 2050.
The agenda is formulated against the backdrop of subsisting economic and social challenges facing the country, including low, fragile, and non-inclusive growth, insecurity, high population growth rate, limited concentric economic diversification, and low productivity. The originators of the plan believe that with the expected improved capital accumulation, investment as a ratio of GDP is expected to increase from the current 29.40% to 40.11% by 2050.
With the expected improved capital accumulation, investments as a percentage of GDP is projected to increase from the current rate of 29.4% to 40.11% by the year 2050. The bulk of this investment is expected to be financed from the private sector. The total employment is also expected to rise to 203.41 million people in 2050 from the current 46.49 million people in 2020. This implies that unemployment will drop significantly to 6.3% in 2050 from the current rate of 33.3%.
Under the plan, it is projected that the bulk of investment is expected to be financed by the private sector, while total employment is expected to rise to 203.41 million in 2050 from 46.99 million in 2020. From State House, Abuja, Kainde Amodu, Trust TV News.
Also on January 30th, President Muhammadu Buhari commissioned the Dala Inland Dry Port in Kano. 4 months after the commissioning, the dry port is not functioning as a port of origin for goods and the final destination for goods. Our correspondent Idris Jibrin examines the establishment of the Dala Dry Port and why it is still not functioning after the official opening. Take a look.
Dala Inland Dry Port in Kano was conceived as a port and logistic free trade zone to provide various services such as transport logistics, warehousing logistics, value-added services and international port services, thereby creating a hub port in Kano.
Dala Inland Dry Port is like the seaport without the water. It's an international port, a customs port, a port to which cargo could begin its journey, and export cargo could begin its journey to any location in the world, and also a port to which any cargo could be destined.
Apart from creating international transport linkages, Dala Inland Dry Port is also expected to reduce cost of doing business and make businesses more competitive and sustainable. But the Kano port may seem far from achieving that.
By having an inland dry port here in Kano, it means you are bringing the shipping services closer to the people. You see, if you have cargo, you are the hassles of having to carry your cargo from Kano to Lagos or Port Harcourt or any other seaport is removed.
The federal government has recently declared Dala Inland Dry Port as a port of origin for export and final destination for goods brought into the country via the nation's seaport. But Dala Inland Dry Port is threatened due to the lack of patronage by importers and exporters.
Unfortunately, we feel that there's not much awareness to what we exporters tend to benefit when we use the dry port. And that's why you see that most of us exporters, we still stick to the old way we know.
Dry port is believed to be primarily effective in the presence of rail lines, especially in terms of bringing cargoes from the seaport. Unfortunately, the Kano-Kaduna Railway, which is to serve this purpose, has not been completed.
The railway, which was supposed to have covered everything, was abandoned. And I always like to say this story. Before President Muhammadu Buhari came in to do the Rail Revolution project, the rail development was abandoned since 1964.
They keep telling me that they are going to use rail systems to move the goods. But I know that the rail system now is not too that effective. And more again is that what they are charging is really on the high side.
But the Nigerian Shippers Council believes that a dry port can still function with or without railway, provided that the shippers are adequately sensitized.
Very soon we'll do an enlightenment for importers and exporters in collaboration with the Dala Inland Port to enlighten the importers and exporters on the advantages of using the port here.
For many, the commissioning of Dala Inland Dry Port in Kano has been done in a hurry. Perhaps this explains why this place is poorly utilized at the moment. The question is whether Dala Inland Dry Port is a project dead on arrival. Idris Jibrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
All right, the President-elect Ahmed Bola Tinubu has promised to work for the growth and even development of the country without marginalizing any path. Tinubu disclosed this in Port Harcourt, the River State capital, where he is on a 2-day visit to inaugurate project executed by Nyesom Wike's administration.
Tinubu praised Governor Wike for the developmental strides in River State, particularly the 12 flyovers constructed across the capital city, saying posterity would kindly remember him. He said with his accomplishments in the state, Nigeria would need the outgoing Rivers governor in higher capacities.
The 12 flyover and the demand you made for reform. I owe you nothing. It's your road. Come to me, I make a demand. Now the one listening on this show, I commend your effort.
Earlier, the Rivers State Governor, Nyesom Wike, drew the attention of the federal government to the need to amend its procurement law in order to end incessant abandonment of projects that it handles. The Rivers State Governor explained that the current procurement law of the federal government only allows for about 15 to 30% to be paid as mobilization fee to a contractor. He said such mega sum usually does not allow the contractor make appreciably progress on the project before being caught up by inflation effects and high cost of materials, which eventually requires variation of the contract terms.
I found out that part of the problem why we're having so much uncompleted projects has to do with our procurement law. If you read the procurement law, it will take very, very long to complete projects, because how much does the procurement law, of course the one of the federal, how much does it say? 15% to 30%. When you give a contract of 15%, before you pay another money, inflation is almost every day, and then there will come some variation because of high cost of building material.
The event was attended by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, and Governors Abubakar Baduru of Jigawa, David Umahi of Ebonyi, Abdurrahman Abdulrazak of Kwara, Sheyi Makinde of Oyo, and Hope Uzodinma of Imo States.
Also, women of Mashigi at Kurmin Kaduna community whose circumstances denied them opportunity to go to school have now enrolled in a school to further their education. The women who live largely in rural communities say despite many odds, they want to acquire knowledge to contribute to the development of their community. Trust TV's Bello Musa visits Mashigi community in Igabi, local government area of Kaduna State, and sent in this report.
This secondary school is run by the community volunteers to educate their members who are now struggling to learn basic communication in English language. Girls of this community are often married off at teenage age, a practice that terminates their hope to achieve their dreams like other girls in the city due to absence of secondary school in the community.
I did not proceed with my education because we don't have a secondary school in our community, so I was married off. We did not know the importance of education. That is why we couldn't further our education after marriage.
Crossing the river is an obstacle that discourages parents from sending their daughters to secondary school in the city.
Crossing the river was a challenge. The canoe sometimes capsized, especially when it is overloaded with people. The fear discouraged us from going to secondary school. Notwithstanding, few were able to proceed to secondary school.
We'll start from the right-hand side, meaning that 6.
Aisha Aminu, a housewife, completed her primary school 21 years ago, but now enrolled in this school. She has a bigger dream to achieve.
I want to be a pharmacist and also run my own pharmacy. That is why I enrolled in this school.
Dauda Ismail is one of the volunteer teachers in the school.
When we sat down, we see that let us apply for the government to come and approve the secondary school here. For the first place, we start from the lesson, tutorial lesson. We organize those that we think that they can be able to handle JS1. We select them from our initiative, and we call and we gather different our elders, community leaders, religious leaders, and say that yes, let us start with secondary school so that we should apply to the government that we have already opened the secondary school. We need their approval so that they should deploy their staff and take over.
I advise women, especially those who got married early, to go back to school and also ensure their children go to school too.
Educating girls is key to the development of the community. Therefore, they are appealing to the government to build more classrooms and recruit teachers in order to encourage women enrollment in the community. Bello Musa, Trust TV News, Kaduna.
All right, that's the much we have from our highlight and packages at the top of the hour. We'll take a short breather. When we return, we'll serve you the newspaper headlines. Please stay with us. Passengers stranded as Labour halts Owerri fight, short air peace operations in Lagos. Lawan Omo Agege under fire for plotting to alter Senate rules. And court strike at 1.8 billion corruption charges against Dasuki's aide and 8 others. And more players for the British court as Ekweremadu wife risks 10-year jail term. These are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Times. We now have joining us in the studio the editor-in-chief of Dateline newspaper, always prompt, always sharp, and always here. Malam Nasrallah, it's a pleasure to have you join us. Good morning.
Thank you.
Something in his spirit told him to do Anko with me again today. I don't know what that is. Someday we will probe that spirit, but it's okay. It's good. We will start. I mean, some of the papers have similar stories running across, and some of them have dwelled on other things. But what seemed to be to have made most of the papers would be the evacuations of Nigerians from Egypt. Finally, after so many hues and cries and explanations and counter-explanations, some of them touched down yesterday. We understand somewhere in the region of 400. There is a whopping 4,600 hanging somewhere, we are not sure. But how does it feel to finally get some across? I mean, whether or not their luggages were brought across, the stories tell us how parents were contacted and they said, bring us our awards. That's what's important. That's what's important. But what do you make of the fact that we have been able to bring down some, and what's your impression of the other arrangements that are outstanding to bring out what appears to be the majority that are still hanging?
Well, I think it's very important that we have commenced the process. These are people that are actually coming from war situation. It's not as if they are coming back from Sudan, maybe from holidays or something like that. So, their family members certainly will be happy. And despite all the challenges, all the problems we have been experiencing since the commencement of the whole issue, I think what is important is the fact that we succeeded somehow in taking the people out of line of danger. So I think that's very important. So all the challenges that we have maybe shown, the authorities in charge should try and see that they don't stand in the way. And like I said, the families of those who have successfully returned, will be happy because, like I said, this is something that nobody will want to see anyone, having difficulties remaining in a country where the authorities, where the government has completely collapsed. So I congratulate those who have succeeded in returning.
All right, so what are lessons that should be learned? I mean, this is just the first set, and we'll still yet to get a full picture of the experiences. However, the government is saying that about 100,000 naira will be given to each and every, of the students who returned. But what are some of the lessons to learn in order to make this returning process more seamless?
Well, like we keep saying, anything that has to do with Nigerian citizens, somehow the government, will appear, as if non-committal, so to say. So now that they are maybe talking in this light, we'll wait to see what will happen. But the lesson we should learn is the fact that every country, especially those who have their citizens in Sudan, they did their best to see that they are evacuated on time. And I didn't like the fact that, we had so many we did more talking, than action actually when it started. So the lesson we should learn, I think, is for us to, approach these issues with all the seriousness that they deserve, because these are Nigerians and they also should be treated as Nigerians.
All right. There's a part of this whole development that seemed to have escaped the conversation, largely because as Nigerians, we were more concerned about the lives of Nigerians that were in imminent danger. But today, the Daily Trust did something noble. The editorial decided to pay attention on what is actually happening in Sudan. They may appear to be a different country, but we share common heritage. And we know how much this country suffered from the breakdown of law and order in Libya. There were proliferation of small arms in Nigeria, which further worsened the crisis we were suffering, especially from around the northern part of the country that traditionally had a trading route leading up to Libya. How important is it that, besides these evacuations, that our government and governments of the sub-Saharan Africa, intensify moves to find a way to calm fray nerves in Sudan? Today, the Daily Trust is calling on the UN and the AU because it appears like nothing is really happening. We are just waiting for the real fight to take place, and whatever is left of what they have destroyed, and then we start talking about rebuilding and all that. How important is it that we move in and de-escalate the situation in Sudan?
Well, I saw a story, I think, this morning, the United Nations talking about the fact that the two warring factions, they have not shown any commitment to stopping the hostilities. And if you look at even how the thing started, it's all about egos, leaders, thinking more about their position than the fate of the people that they claim to lead. Because the army chief who, got the support of the RSF, somehow, because now they are talking about integrating the RSF members into the army. So he thinks that's something that is likely to see to the end of his reign. So because of that, people are now in danger simply because two people are fighting. And for Africa, especially, so many people around the world actually see us as one country, because whatever happens in Sudan is likely to have implications not just on its immediate neighbors, but the entire continent as a whole. So I also saw a story, about Eritrea, saying that if they can be supported, they can actually see what they can do to end all the hostilities. So Africa should not allow this to continue, because right now, if you talk about, maybe if you remove Egypt, most of the other people that have been mentioned are the United Arab Emirates, having the support of a faction, things like that. So Africa should worry and face the problem squarely, because this is something, like I said, where whatever implications it has, it's Africa that will bear the brunt.
Okay, so we saw organizations like the EU as well as the UN weigh in when, the Ukraine-Russia crisis started. Now, so far, it's seeming like the UN has been the one that has been doing so much of the talking. And we've not heard, even though ECOWAS is regional, we're all Africans, right? And also the AU not saying much about the situation. So like Mr. Sunday asked earlier, do we have to wait till the situation deteriorates to a point where we have to start talking about building from the rubble before, we as Africans rise up to actually address two warring factions? Because at the end of the day, from what we have read in the mainstream media, it just looks like two very powerful generals having, something that went from a trade of words to now a full-blown war, and citizens' lives are currently in danger.
Well, like we said, Africa should face it squarely, because we have reached a stage where, all the talks should end. And maybe if you talk about the European Union, I don't think the problem in Sudan will affect it in the same way what is happening in Ukraine, with Russia, because if you look at...
That's why I mentioned the African Union. We also have the African Union.
We also have the African Union, but the problem is sometimes, because this is something that has to do with Africa, nobody wants to stake his neck and maybe appear to be supporting one side or the other. But we have to face the reality. The two generals cannot be right at the same time. Certainly one is maybe causing the whole problem, or someone among them is actually the one frustrating all the efforts to make sure there is peace in the end. So we should have that strength of to face whoever is the problem. But like I said, because this is Africa, probably they are looking outside the continent to see somebody that will be seen as neutral, and which is quite unfortunate. Now that we are already in this situation, honestly, we need to do all we can, to see that we end it. Even this morning, I also saw a report saying that one of the best-known actresses in Sudan was actually caught in the crossfire and she was killed. Oh. So if you see, this is someone that is maybe quite famous, but so many people must have been killed due to
all right.
hostilities.
Moving away from Sudan and moving away from all the big stories, deservedly so, that made the front pages, I would like to focus on something that would appear to be, or that would project us in a way as being selfish, but we don't talk about ourselves.
Yes, let's blow our heads.
Enough. And that is that position that the Daily Trust gave us on the front page to talk about the Press Freedom Day and the IPI setting agenda for Tinubu's government. I was thinking the IPI would have first of all set agendas for media owners in Nigeria. Journalists are some of the most terribly treated in this climb. Yeah. We go several months without salaries in some platform, needless to mention them, they know themselves. Terrible working conditions, pensions are not remitted. I mean, when you see veterans in this profession, you worry about where old age is going to take you because it doesn't look like a good place to be. The nation itself doesn't seem to appreciate how much that we have sacrificed, whether in blood or in sweat, to keep this nation afloat. The whole fight about stopping a third-term agenda was fought squarely at the media houses. And every time we have attempted to expose corruption, it is at the expense of our operations or even our lives. And when we check out miserably. I mean, you don't want to see those category of people they call veteran journalists. What's your admonition to, well, the IPI has spoken to set agenda to the president, largely around improving the environment to function, but what's your admonition to media entrepreneurs on the need to revisit the welfare of journalists?
Actually, one of the reasons why the stakeholders, that's the government, the private sector, and what have you, don't take us seriously is because they know, the things that happen within the media itself. Sometimes, you accuse the government of not paying salaries. Sometimes you accuse the government of doing something that actually you are doing within your own organization. And I don't want to believe that all the things you hear, about the media. Yes, certainly there are challenges. The owners will complain about not having enough money, especially now that things are going online and what have you. But the fact that you remain in business means you are also making some, amount of money. So you should be able to take care of all the people that are working for you. Because if it's a business that is no longer, breaking even, something that you cannot even discharge your own responsibility, then why don't you close it down so that nobody will be expecting you to
meet obligations,
to meet any obligations. So the media owners, I think maybe another thing we should talk about, is the fact that the media is always talking about self-regulation. We don't want somebody coming from outside to tell us what to do. But honestly, we are also not doing the right thing. Because if you look at the things that are happening within the media itself, like I said, there is no way you can get all the influence that you want to get with issues like that.
All right. Buhari launches Nigeria's Agenda 2050. From the days I became wise till this day, I'm sure I've heard several kinds of agenda. There was Vision 2000, and then it became 2010. And as we're approaching 2010, they moved the goalpost to 2020. And we have gone past 2020, now we are talking 2050. By what time all the people who set out these plans may have checked out to the other side. The other side. Are we committed to the whole concept of setting agenda, or do we just enjoy basically having something to munch on? Because from now on, what you will see government ministries do is to take this phrase and infuse it in the speeches of all their principals. They'll say in line with the Vision 2050 and whatever. Is that all that this is to us? Do we understand the import of this kind of agenda, and how significant, or rather what relevance is there for a government that is on the exit road to be discussing this agenda? Shouldn't it have been something left to the incoming administration?
And in addition to that, Sunday, you see, there's also this issue of, or the question rather, of whether these agendas, after they've been set, are, reevaluated or reevaluated, and then planned for a next agenda. So we just hear a Vision 2010, and when it's 2011, everybody just keeps mute. And then we set an agenda 2020. And when it's 2020, we all keep mute like nothing happened, and then we set another agenda. So is there a form of evaluation to see whether the agenda set was actually fulfilled to some extent? What were the things we were able to meet up with in the agenda, and what do we need to build upon, to make the next agenda more successful? Is that in place?
Well, I think we are just launching all these agendas for launching's sake, because, like you said, what happened to all the previous agendas that we have had in this country? Personally, to me, I think it's about our leaders. Everybody wants to say, okay, this is the one that I started. Nobody is actually talking about the fact that those who, came up with something similar in the past, nothing happened. Because if you are talking about development, there are so many targets, and nobody is saying there is anything wrong with setting a target that you want to meet, within a certain period of time. But if you can key into all these sustainable development goals, so many things that are actually universal, and you are not talking about a global village, whatever happens in Nigeria may have implication outside Nigeria, or things that are happening outside Nigeria having implications for Nigeria and the people living within Nigeria. So we shouldn't worry, we shouldn't concentrate all our energy in starting an agenda, launching all sorts of policy documents, when in reality we know that nobody will be there to even talk about implementing them. But then you also channel money. And maybe that's even the major concern of all those who are starting all these agendas, so that maybe by the time they start them, they devote some money which they can feast on, while the nation remains the way it is.
While it's very important to start an agenda, from what I understood, it's also very important to finish the agenda. Mr. Nasir Lawal, the Editor-in-Chief, Dateline Nigeria, thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning to review and also share your thoughts on the headlines of national dailies. We will now go on a quick break, and when we return at the top of the hour, we'll serve you more on Daybreak. Don't go anywhere. It's the top of the hour. It's 9 a.m. here, of course, and in Nigeria. Good morning, Nigeria. Welcome to Daybreak. And it's the second leg of the program. If you've missed the first leg, do well to catch up on our various, profiles and channels, and as well as social media platforms on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you could as well watch us live on YouTube. I am Sagir Ibrahim.
All right, I am Sunday Michael Ogu. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what part of the world you're watching us from. We are live on YouTube. You can therefore watch us from any part of the world, and it's a pleasure to have you stay with us.
Let's now serve you the headlines again. Sudan crisis, Nigerian evacuees finally arrive in the country.
We have overcome challenges of obtaining Nigerian passports, federal government.
And also, Indomie noodles expect more cancer cases in children, according to Institute.
And now the details. The first batch of Nigerians who fled the war in Sudan have returned through the country. Due to the closure of the Sudanese airspace, the federal government made arrangements for them to be conveyed to Egypt by road and where they were to connect flights back home. The Nigerians who were lifted on Wednesday evening landed at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport at around 11:30 p.m. Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, Sadia Farouk, Chairman CEO of the Nigerians in the Diaspora Commission, Abike Debri Erewa, and the Director General of the National Emergency Management Agency, Ahmed Mustafa, welcomed them back to the country. The minister disclosed that each of them will get a token of 100,000 to enable them settling.
And also, the federal government said that her strident efforts at overcoming the challenges Nigerians encounter in obtaining passports are yielding the desired results. The government also urged citizens to assist the reform process at the Nigerian Immigration Service, NIS, by not patronizing corrupt officials who are making the process difficult for them. Minister of Interior, Ogbeni Rauf Aregbesola, who spoke at the commissioning of the front desk office in Oyo State, said the Oyo Passport Front Office is part of the long-term initiatives to make the process of data capturing, production and collection, which are critical areas of the passport process, easier, all in a bid to address the growing concerns of Nigerians.
And the National Institute for Cancer Research and Treatment has expressed concern over the revelation of the presence of a carcinogenic compound, ethylene oxide, in Indomie instant noodles special chicken flavor. The Director General of the Institute, Professor Usman Malami Aliu, said he found that some brands of Indomie noodle contain ethylene oxide. Nigerians should expect an escalation of various forms of cancer in the months or years ahead, depending on how long people have consumed the brand. He said more worrisome is that Nigerians should also expect an increase in cancer cases among children because Indomie noodle is a popular food among most Nigerian children.
And that's it for the headlines this morning. We will now serve you some of the packages we've put together. President Muhammadu Buhari has launched a new long-term national development plan, the Nigeria Agenda 2050. The agenda, which aims to ensure that the country attains a per capita GDP of $33,000 per annum, placing her among the top middle-income economies in the world in the next 27 years. The president launched the plan on Wednesday before the commencement of the Federal Executive Council meeting at the State House in Abuja. Trust TV State House correspondent Kehinde Amodu was there and reports.
The Nigeria Agenda 2050 is targeting a dynamic, industrialized and knowledge-based economy that generates inclusive and sustainable development for the country. The president believes successive administrations will find it easier to deliver on election promises because of the instruments embedded in the plan for continuous implementation.
The plan we are launching today is a vision of a dynamic, industrialized, and knowledge-based economy that generates inclusive and sustainable development for the country. The broad target is to ensure that Nigeria attains per capita GDP of $33,328 United States dollars per annum that will place her among the top middle-income economies in the world by 2050.
The agenda is formulated against the backdrop of subsisting economic and social challenges facing the country, including low, fragile, and non-inclusive growth, insecurity, high population growth rate, limited concentric economic diversification, and low productivity. The originators of the plan believe that with the expected improved capital accumulation, investment as a ratio of GDP is expected to increase from the current 29.40% to 40.11% by 2050.
With the expected improved capital accumulation, investments as a percentage of GDP is projected to increase from the current rate of 29.4% to 40.11% by the year 2050. The bulk of this investment is expected to be financed from the private sector. The total employment is also expected to rise to 203.41 million people in 2050 from the current 46.49 million people in 2020. This implies that unemployment will drop significantly to 6.3% in 2050 from the current rate of 33.3%.
Under the plan, it is projected that the bulk of investment is expected to be financed by the private sector, while total employment is expected to rise to 203.41 million in 2050 from 46.99 million in 2020. From State House, Abuja, Kehinde Amudu, Trust TV News.
All right. The President-elect Bola Ahmed Tinubu has promised to work for the growth and even development of the country without marginalizing any part. Tinubu disclosed this in Port Harcourt, the Rivers State capital, where he is on a two-day visit to inaugurate project executed by the Nyesom Wike administration.
Tinubu praised Governor Wike for the developmental strides in Rivers State, particularly the 12 flyovers constructed across the capital city, saying posterity would kindly remember him. He said with his accomplishments in the state, Nigeria would need the outgoing Rivers governor in higher capacities.
The 12 flyover and the demand we made for reform. I owe you nothing. It's your road. You can come to me and make a demand. Now the one listening on this show, I commend your effort.
Earlier, the Rivers State Governor, Nyesom Wike, drew the attention of the federal government to the need to amend its procurement law in order to end incessant abandonment of projects that it handles. The Rivers State Governor explained that the current procurement law of the federal government only allows for about 15 to 30% to be paid as mobilization fee to a contractor. He said such mega sum usually does not allow the contractor make appreciably progress on the project before being caught up by inflation effects and high cost of materials, which eventually requires variation of the contract terms.
I found out that part of the problem why we're having so much uncompleted projects has to do with our procurement law. If you read the procurement law, it will take very, very long to complete projects, because how much does the procurement law, of course the one of the federal, how much does it say? 15% to 30%. When you give a contract of 15%, before you pay another money, inflation is almost every day, and then there will come some variation because of high cost of building material.
The event was attended by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, and Governors Abubakar Baduru of Jigawa, David Umahi of Ebonyi, Abdurrahman Abdulrazak of Kwara, Sheyi Makinde of Oyo, and Hope Uzodinma of Imo States.
And to other stories, women of Mashigi at Kurmin, Kaduna communities whose circumstances denied them the opportunity to go to school have now enrolled in a school to further their education. The women who live largely in a rural community say despite many odds, they want to acquire knowledge to contribute to the development of their community. Trust TV's Bello Musa visits Mashigi community in Igabi local government area of Kaduna State and sent in this report. Take a look.
This secondary school is run by the community volunteers to educate their members who are now struggling to learn basic communication in English language. Girls of this community are often married off at teenage age, a practice that terminates their hope to achieve their dreams like other girls in the city due to absence of secondary school in the community.
I
did not proceed with my education because we don't have a secondary school in our community, so I was married off. We did not know the importance of education. That is why we couldn't further our education after marriage.
Crossing the river is an obstacle that discourages parents from sending their daughters to secondary school in the city.
Crossing the river was a challenge. The canoe sometimes capsized, especially when it is overloaded with people. The fear discouraged us from going to secondary school. Notwithstanding, few were able to proceed to secondary school.
So start from the right hand side, meaning that 6.
Aisha Aminu, a housewife, completed her primary school 21 years ago, but now enrolled in this school. She has a bigger dream to achieve.
I want to be a pharmacist and also run my own pharmacy. That is why I enrolled in this school.
Dauda Ismail is one of the volunteer teachers in the school.
When we sat down, we see that let us apply for the government to come and approve the secondary school here. For the first place, we start from the lesson, tutorial lesson. We organize those that we think that they can be able to handle JS1. We select them from our initiative, and we call and we gather different our elders, community leaders, religious leaders, and say that yes, let us start with secondary school so that we should apply to the government that we have already opened the secondary school. We need their approval so that they should deploy their staff and take over.
I advise women, especially those who got married early, to go back to school and also ensure their children go to school too.
Educating girls is key to the development of the community. Therefore, they are appealing to the government to build more classrooms and recruit teachers in order to encourage women enrollment in the community. Bello Musa, Trust TV News, Kaduna.
Years after the proclamation of the World Freedom Day, substantial progress towards achieving a free press and freedom of expression around the world has been made. This is the view of some media practitioners in Bauchi State who are of the opinion that the press needs more support and encouragement in discharging their responsibilities. Adamu Imam reports.
Despite the above assertion, practitioners in Bauchi say they remain resolute in bringing the needed change in nation building while promoting the interests of the common man. They stated this while commemorating the World Press Freedom Day.
The ability of the pressman to go scout for the news. It is the responsibility of his employer to facilitate his moving around. But when you don't facilitate, when you just ask him, go and search for news and your livelihood, but don't spoil my name, what are you saying? We have organizations in Nigeria that are doing that. They don't pay their staff, they don't give them working equipment, yet they want them to deliver. How possible would that be? Definitely, such a journalist will play and will go along with the highest bidder. The person that gives him is the person who's going to propagate.
Know how press will operate with 100%
freedom. They will not operate free, honestly. Considering the situation we are operating, the conditions, even the registering of the media houses, you can see, if the government doesn't want you, hardly get the license to operate, and they can also seize your license in operating. So honestly, you hardly get the 100%. What we are after is at least media and the press should be given the maximum freedom to operate.
Yes. So I will confidently say that 90-something% of the journalists are working for the emancipation of the people, how people will strive in the society, how developmental stories that will protect the interests of the communities, stories that will bring people together, people that will salvage people from other issues that are not needed. So journalists are working for the emancipation of the people.
According to them, although Nigerian journalists are always faced with challenges in the line of duty, they have, however, remained undaunted and urge leaders at all levels to have a rethink on how press issues are handled for the overall interests of the country. Adam Imam, Trust TV News, Bauchi.
All right, welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television. This flight set sail at 8. So if you're just coming in, you have missed out on quite a number of issues. But whatever is left is considerably very important. You don't want to miss it. Nigeria is currently experiencing a large outbreak of Lassa fever with 4,702 suspected cases, 5 probable cases, and 877 confirmed cases between epidemiological week 1 and 15 of the 2023, that is the week ending 16th April. Among the confirmed cases, there have been 152 deaths. Cases have been reported from 101 local government areas in 26 out of the 36 states, including the Federal Capital Territory. Lassa fever is endemic in Nigeria and part of West Africa, where the multi-mammate rats, the main reservoir of the Lassa virus, is common. This morning we have in the studio Dr. Sandra Mba. She warned me not to pronounce it as MBA. Incident Manager, Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention, NDDC. Dr. Mba, you are welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
There's a popular Dr. Mba in Nigeria, so every time we mention the name, you are tempted to think we are talking about a man. So we have a different Dr. Mba in the studio. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure as well.
Every other year, this conversation come up for mentioning. And it's been with us for a while, as the intro would suggest. But what is appalling is the number of deaths we keep recording. I mean, we don't even get this from an air disaster or something. Every time it comes, we seem to know what causes it, we seem to know what we need to do, but we still lose this large number of persons to Lassa fever. Why does it appear to be such a dangerous occurrence in Nigeria? Can you please take us through all of what leads to this amount of death?
All right, so thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So basically, we know that Lassa fever is a viral hemorrhagic fever. It is a virus. It's caused by the Lassa virus, which is largely found in the Mastomys natalensis, or what we call the multi-mammoth rats. It's usually these rats that have multiple breasts underneath them. So it's endemic in Nigeria. We've had Lassa fever in Nigeria since for over 50 years, and we have certain states in Nigeria that have largely affected by Lassa fever. So yearly we have our seasonal outbreaks. Majority of the times this usually occurs in the dry seasons between December and May. A lot of times we don't really know exactly why, but studies have shown that during those dry seasons, some areas in Nigeria especially, we practice bush burnings, and the grounds are quite dry and hot. So most of these rodents actually run from the forest area or the bushy area.
Habitat.
Exactly, the natural habitat, and run towards environmental homes and things like this. So Lassa fever usually presents as a febrile illness. As we know, well, we say Lassa fever. So fever is one of the first symptoms that usually people have. Usually high-grade fever, and in some cases it could also be low grade. And then you have headaches, malaise, sore throats, general body weakness. It largely looks like malaria at first, but then over time you see that it starts worsening over a period of time. So with that, we usually encourage healthcare workers to have a high index of suspicion, especially when we're getting towards the high transmission season of Lassa. We also encourage people and the public to present to the hospital early. So, do not self-medicate. When you start feeling sick, you have to present. So most of the time it's usually transmitted through rodents to human. So primary mode of transmission is usually rodent to human, but in other cases it's actually human to human also. So rodent to human is when someone gets in contact with an infected rat, or the virus, or through the saliva, through the feces or the urine of these infected rats, and then maybe ingest it through food or through poor hand hygiene and things like that. In some cases during the dry season, we also know that we practice what we call drying of garri and maize and some of these foodstuffs outside because it's dry. But in a place where it's not properly protected, you can actually have you can't be there all the time, so you can actually have these rodents come around and want to eat from these grains that are spread outside, and then they defecate, or they pass urine or the saliva. And in cases like garri, where you don't really cook it and you just eat it, so you can get infected. Or when you keep your foodstuffs at home and you don't properly cover it with a seal-proof lid, so they can actually get into it, and then if you consume it improperly, you can get infected. But human to human is largely when an infected human being is sick and showing symptoms, and then that person actually is being taken care of by another person, so who doesn't practice standard precautions, or in healthcare workers case, if you don't practice IPC, proper infection prevention and control, or standard precautions. Or even sometimes it could be your family member who's taking care of you, and maybe you vomit or some fluids that come out from that body, so they can get infected. So those are the modes of transmission, and usually incubation period of Lassa is ranges between 3 to 21 days, so that's about 3 weeks. So when we're conducting contact tracing and looking at people who are affected, we follow them up for 3 weeks to ensure that they don't have symptoms or they don't develop symptoms. So when they do develop symptoms, we test them, and we ensure that they go to an isolation center where they are properly managed.
Interesting.
Okay. So the NCDC is doing a lot of work with regards to tracing cases and identifying, cases of Lassa fever across the country. But one would begin to wonder when it comes to the issue of setting out advisory and precaution. I give an example. For, let's say, the change in weather from the rainy to dry season, of course, there's always an expectation that you would expect, for example, from the rainy season to the dry season, you expect symptoms of perhaps cough and allergic reaction to the change in the weather condition. So there's always an expectation that these things could happen. But for Lassa fever, it's becoming to look like it's a recurring exactly decimal. So are there certain advisory or are there certain things that Nigerians should look out for? In terms of, you spoke about maybe from December to when May. Again? Till May. So are there advisories being put out whenever we get to this very high gestation periods for the spread of the virus, for Nigerians to be aware that, okay, I think this is the time when Lassa fever is going to be rampant. This is the time when I need to be more careful. And for those of us that might have symptoms of malaria during this period, we should also be more careful to, go an extra mile to do tests and ensure that it's not Lassa fever.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the NCDC, as I already mentioned, ahead of the high transmission season, because it's been, over the trends of years before, over the 5-year period, you would, if you look at our website and you see our situation reports, which we have, you would see that there is a trend pattern, and then from these times where the dry season starts, the cases starts increasing. So what we do normally before those, that time of the dry season, we start sending out advisories. We send out advisories to healthcare, to healthcare organizations and bodies. We send out advisories to the public. We send out advisories and we reach out to states, to the commissioners of health and as high level as that. We send out these advisories to alert states, to alert organizational bodies, and let them know that we are approaching the high transmission season of Lassa, and therefore these are certain precautions you need to start taking into account. So of course with the public, it's a different, advice that we send out to them. We tell them, wash your hands regularly, avoid sunning your food outside, keep your foodstuffs in a tightly sealed lids, block all the holes in your houses so you prevent rodents. If you have a way to, whatever means of extermination that you need to do, because you can't tell which one has it and which one doesn't. And, science is increasing. You can't really, before we say it's the multi-mammate rats, but in some cases, you've also seen cases where even other species of rodents have actually, been seen to have this Lassa virus also. So things are evolving. We're not really sure as to exactly how this is happening, but there is some kind of animal mix somewhere going around. But so we send out advisories to also healthcare workers, and we start telling them to look out, to have a high index of suspicion. So when someone presents to the hospital and they having certain symptoms that look like malaria, also do your differential diagnosis. So think about Lassa fever, think about other viral hemorrhagic fevers, and not just Lassa. But it's always good to have your differential diagnosis. We tell healthcare workers to also, apply standard precautions. It doesn't matter if this is your neighbor, your child, your husband, or your family member. Always apply standard precautions of IPC so that you are protecting yourself, and in turn you're protecting the community, and you're protecting even other patients that come into the hospital during that time. So we also send out advisories to states. Just as I mentioned earlier, we have some states in Nigeria, like Edo State, Ondo State, Bauchi, Ebonyi, Benue, and Taraba. So basically these 6 states account for over 75% of our cases in Nigeria.
We're in the month of May.
Yeah. So what we do, usually the NCDC does quite a lot with regards to, especially with high burden and hotspot states. We send out advisories to all states. We ensure that they start, understanding that we are currently getting towards the high transmission season of Lassa. Therefore, everybody needs to start have a high index of suspicion. We have what we call the disease surveillance notifications officers and the state epidemiologist at these states, at every state. Disease surveillance notification officers is in every LGA. So we ensure that they start conducting, active case survey. They start looking out, their surveillance is more heightened during this period. Risk communication activities are going on at the local levels down to the community, ensuring that people are reporting what they see. We have community community workers who support the states as well, and they ensure that they look out for things like this. So we also ensure that we do what we preposition commodities. So the NCDC actually supports states by prepositioning both medicines with regards to management of Lassa fever. We also preposition PPEs, which is preventive equipment that these medical workers wear to manage these cases. We also preposition reagents, which is for laboratory diagnosis. So we have about 9 labs in country across different states, including the National Reference Laboratory here in Abuja. And we're trying to also expand to have more, to see if we can actually get up to 15 or more labs to manage and to be able to diagnose Lassa. And we have treatment centers across states as well. We have over 20 treatment centers across Nigeria and across different states that manage Lassa fever. So we support states with regards to this. We also sometimes, in certain cases, we support treatment centers with capacity to manage. So in some cases, we help centers that are overwhelmed with surge staff. So this year alone, we've actually we're supporting 6 treatment centers with surge staff support. So this is just because of the magnitude and the increase in numbers of cases in the treatment centers. So we're supporting them with that manpower support that they can manage. We've also actually deployed rapid response teams to states. We deployed to 6 high-burden states that I mentioned earlier. So they supported the states for a period of, I think, a couple of weeks, maybe almost a month. So in these cases, we support states in every way that we can to be able to fight this disease.
All right. 2 things come to mind, especially for those 6 states you mentioned, and they seem to be close to each other. So there's Benue Ebonyi, if I recall. There is Ondo and Edo, who share border, if you like. And then there's Bauchi and Taraba.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why is there a particular practice why these 6 states continue to
appear on the radar
and recording 70-80% of the cases? That's one.
Okay.
Why do we always have that high mortality rate? Is it a function of people not reporting early or coming in at the terminal point? What exactly are we doing wrong to be recording this huge amount of mortality?
Okay, so for 2 questions that you asked. So the first question really is why these 6 states? So I would want us to I would want to take us back a bit and actually let us know that this year, in this current epidemiological year from week 1 to week 16 where we are, we have actually recorded over 890, I think 97 cases, 877 confirmed cases across 25 states, right? So this is not just in these 6 states. Yeah, so these are states that have recorded at least 1 confirmed case in Nigeria, and then across we have over 90 LGAs as well that have been recorded these confirmed cases. However, we do have these 6 states which are the high burdens, and there's no particular reason why these states have kind of tend
to take that because they do a lot of rats chasing.
So, but in some cases, you have situations where some states practice certain behaviors, right, that may predispose you to coming down to certain issues like this. Honestly, though, we don't know exactly why these rats are more or found more in these states. We also don't even have, I mean, science is still evolving. You know, we also know that rodents are constantly moving. They also proliferate quite quickly.
That's right.
So naturally, I mean, I think it's every 90 days, scientifically proven. So these are certain things that we need to think about. There's no particular reason as to why, but what we are trying to do is really focus on how do we prevent this disease, and how do we prevent the burden to reduce it. But when you talk about the deaths, now we record deaths from Lassa fever, but it's good to also note and take us back a couple of years and actually remember that couple of years back, the deaths were so much more higher, but because of the constant involvement, because of improvements in surveillance, improvement in diagnosis capacity, improvement in management, improvement in risk communication activities, improvement in logistics, improvement in IPC and sending out the right message to everybody, we've actually reduced our case fatality rate. Now, we're not where we ought to be, but we're slowly getting better, and we're much better than where we were. So yes, right now our case fatality rate, I think it's about 15 or 17%. But there was a time where we used to have 50%, case fatality rate, which means, almost everybody who comes down ends up dead. But we have improved, and we're improving. Of course, there's more work to be done, but our surveillance capacity has improved. The NCDC has what we call the SOMAS, which is the Surveillance Outbreak Management Analysis System. So this actually gives us real-time data reporting across all the states in Nigeria, down to the local levels. So these are areas of improvement that we've recorded over the time in Nigeria at the NCDC, and we're currently seeing how best we can improve further. And we're also improving in our research capacity. Just yesterday we concluded a 2-day Lassa fever research colloquium. And this colloquium, basically, the overall aim of this colloquium was to bring out a 5-year Lassa fever research agenda, and that prioritizes, that kind of gives light to key research priorities in Nigeria. So when we talk about preventions, we can't really do a lot of preventions activities without research. Research actually plays a good role in some of these activities. We also developed our 5-year strategy plan, Lassa fever's 5-year strategic plan, and this plan really just the overall aim is to see how we can reduce our case fatality to at least 1 digit. So currently we're 17, so 17 is a 2-digit number. So if we can actually further reduce the case fatality to 1 digit percentage, that would be a huge success for Nigeria and for the NCDC.
All right, just for clarity, especially for some of the states you mentioned, does the habit, because you talked about certain habits of eating bushmeat or bush rats, or these particular types with those
the multi-mammoth rat,
yes, does it have any impact on contacting Lassa fever in a way? Because I mean, you talked about the cases of Gari where they are not really boiled, you just basically put them in warm waters or cold waters, as the case may be. Well, with these bush rats, they are processed. They go through heat and all. Does it increase in any way? Are there chances that people who consume them would also stand a chance of contacting Lassa fever?
For the sake of the audience.
So, I mean, we're not sure exactly how. Now, when something is processed, how do you know that's properly processed, right? And then you also think about the person who's processing it. So whoever is going to have contact with this rats or bushmeats, during the processing stage, that person can also get infected, correct?
Correct.
Now, if something is also processed, you don't know how, if it's poorly cooked, if it's good, well cooked. So some of these things are factors that you can't really say this is the reasons why. Neither can you say, this, you should do this. But what we do advise is to avoid things like that. So avoid bushmeats, especially when we are in certain seasons, right? But naturally, I would say avoid it, as much as possible, because you don't also know, sometimes we're not really sure what it is we're consuming when it comes to these, bush rats or bush meats, rabbits that we see. Neither do we know what, how whoever processed it actually, if they, how well they did it. So it's better to avoid. I think, in those aspects, prevention is usually better than cure. Prevention is always better than cure.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned that the NCDC has about 20 treatment centers across the country. So still for the sake of our viewers, because I know that this question would be on their mind, because it came to mind the moment you mentioned that, who bears the cost of treatment? That's one. And then secondly, does the NCDC still carry out expectedly contact tracing as was done during COVID and other outbreaks?
Yeah, so absolutely. As I said earlier, we collaborate. So what we actually do especially when we are in the high transmission season, at some point we do what we call a risk assessment, right? So when we do a risk assessment, we assess the risk of the disease at the current time, looking at every other factor that we take into place. And this guides our information to see if we're actually going to activate what we call the emergency operation centers. So the emergency operation centers is the coordinating board that literally just coordinates the entire response of Lassa for the country across the affected states. Now, at the state level and at subnational level, we have actually gone ahead to support states to establish state emergency operation centers, what we call the state primary health emergency operation centers. So every state in Nigeria has this emergency operation center, and it's not just for Lassa. This is really across all public health diseases. So for COVID-19, we had EOCs, across all the states as well, that was coordinating the response of COVID as well, and every other diphtherias, monkeypox, and so on. So this EOCs activates upon the, when a disease has been, when the risk assessment has been done and that disease has been seen to actually be of a risk. Now, states can also activate their EOCs based on what is going on at the state, even before the national activates the EOC. But once the national activates, it coordinates it across every state that's been affected. So during these periods, we actually support states to ensure that, their response to Lassa fever is optimal. We support them. We also support them with contact tracing support if they need it. Now, at the state level, the state is also able to coordinate, certain responses for themselves. And we also encourage states to take responsibility in even leading some of these responses, because, we are providing support. We're not going to take over from your state and help do that, but we'll provide as much support as we can. So states usually take a lead with contact tracing activities. They ensure that every patient that has been confirmed their contacts are traced and followed up, just as I said, for 21 days. And then if they need support with contact tracing, of course, they communicate, and we see how best we can support them. So it could be in different ways that we see or that they require. And then we also, for the management aspect, it's good to also let the public know that ribavirin is free. So at the treatment center level, anybody who's tested positive for Lassa is managed. Well, ribavirin is free. However, when you do other, yes, because ribavirin is the drug of choice currently that is being used to manage Lassa. The Nigerian government has ensured that this is distributed across all treatment centers and tertiary facilities for free. Okay. So when a patient is being managed, they do not charge them for ribavirin. However, they also do not charge them for testing Lassa fever. It's free. But you do know that when you're being managed, you have other, cost expenses with, other medications that might be needed, antibiotics and all the other aspects that may be introduced. So those aspects are not free, because that's at the, a prerogative of the facility.
Okay, but are they affordable?
Well, It's quite. So it depends on how, so severity of the disease also plays a factor. And what we also, and sometimes in cases we encourage patients and we encourage public to present early to the facilities, because early presentation actually allows you to start receiving management early enough. And in turn, you probably, the likelihood of having severe disease is very slim. You're able to get treated quickly.
Okay.
When you delay presentation, you may have a likelihood of being severe.
Okay.
And now being severe may also cause some complications with what Lassa causes. So Lassa can cause, multiple organ failures, especially with the kidneys. And then you would need dialysis and all of those things, which are not very,
So, as we had with the COVID, are there underlying issues that could worsen the Lassa fever? Should one pick it up and you already are managing some form of illness? Is it applicable?
Yeah, well, just as I mentioned, Lassa fever can cause multiple organ, failures. So, and those are in severe cases. With people who have, already existing comorbidities, right? Like, diabetes, hypertension, and certain comorbidities could be, could pose a higher preposition or predisposition to actually having more severe cases because of the underlying issues that they already have. But early presentation to the facility usually is your best bet if you are sick and if you are tested. However, we encourage people to, as much as possible, prevent.
All right. Before we let Dr. Sandra go, how much of these collaborations you talked about with states also include faith-based organizations, community level participation, especially because that is likely where these persons can be better mobilized, given that we are predominantly members of two major faiths, and we probably will be listening to their faith-based leaders more than they would government agencies.
So whenever we support, states, or we send out these advisories, we also reach out to faith-based, especially if we're going into communities. We ensure that we also pay advocacy to community leaders, because it's very important. And these are people who, who are championing the community at large. And also, we also, reach out to, imams and, pastors and so on and so forth, because we know that it's a whole of approach. And just to also note and really say, which is very key and very important, Lassa fever management is actually coordinated as a One Health approach. So when we say One Health, we're not just working as NCDC alone. And even when we, carry out our, response activities to states and to, across board, we actually conduct this with the Federal Ministry of Environment and Federal Ministry of Agric, because it's all encompassing and it actually affects everybody. So Federal Ministry of Health, Agric and Environment. So whenever we actually have response activities, we also go as a One Health approach. Even at our EOC at the national level and state levels, they actually have representatives from all these bodies as well that are very much involved, as well as multiple stakeholders and partners that support us and support Nigeria with quite a lot of these responses.
Interesting. Moments of education, moments of enlightenment, eye-opening moments there, especially for those of you who can stay away from bushmeat. Now you know the attendant risks attached. You want to risk Lassa fever, or just do away from the bushmeat for a particular period of time, or find alternative. Find alternative. There are several chicken hotspots and suya hotspots, that can make up for that. Dr. Sandra Mba has provided sufficient enlightenment in this program, and I hope you have found that very educative and very enlightening, and you have drawn very useful lessons from the things that she had said this morning. We want to thank you for finding time to be here. We know how busy your schedules can be, especially at the height of this event. We hope that we'll find time to bring you again.
Yeah.
Maybe not on Lassa fever, maybe on some other things positive. Once again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, Nigerians, we want to thank you for allowing us free access into your living room. We hope we have been able to meet your expectations. Let's do this again tomorrow. I am Sunday Michael Ogu.
And I'm Sagir Ibrahim. Do well to vote for Trust TV in the upcoming TV Awards organized by the Broadcasting Organization of Nigeria. Thank you for watching and see you next time.